Good morning, church. We're again in First Thessalonians, and today we're going to start chapter 3. And it starts this way. Therefore, when we could bear it no longer, we were willing to be left behind at Athens alone. And we sent Timothy, our brother, and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ, to establish and exhort you in your faith, that no one be moved by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we are destined for this. For when we were with you, we kept telling you beforehand that we were to suffer affliction, just as it has come to pass, and just as you know. For this reason, when I could bear it no longer, I sent to learn about your faith, and for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you, and our labor would be in vain. Paul's deep concern for the Thessalonian church is being expressed in this passage. He's already expressed it in the past, but he's talking about it again. And when they left Thessalonica, they were afflicted by the Jews in the city that they went. And so they went to another city, and they were just desperate to know how they were doing. And so then he says, when we could bear it no longer, when we couldn't just take it anymore, we sent Timothy. We were willing to be left behind at Athens. That's how he puts it. We were left behind. We sent somebody we desperately cared for and needed in our ministry, but we didn't care. We were trying to be selfless, and so we sent Timothy to you. And we sent Timothy, our brother, and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ. Paul calls Timothy a brother. This is meaning, yes, that he is a believer, but it's more than that. He's our brother, equal with Paul. Paul is putting him on the same plane as himself, and then he calls him God's co-worker. God's co-worker. God's co-worker is one who works with God, who's doing the very things that God is doing. This is used in 1 Corinthians of Apollos and Paul, when Paul is talking about them, saying, one of us watered, one of us planted, but God caused the growth. They're co-workers with God in that they're planting seeds, they're watering seeds, and God is growing seeds together. And so they sent Timothy, who's a co-worker in the gospel of Christ. So he's planting the gospel. He's talking about Jesus. He's going to be telling you of the resurrection. He's got that message from the gospel. And this is the reason he came, to establish and exhort you in your faith. So Timothy's coming, and he's going to plant and water the seed, expecting that God is going to be the one doing the growth, but he's going to do it by exhortation and by establishing. So he's going to teach doctrine and establish their faith and exhort them then to live in accordance with that faith. This is the work of a gospel worker. This is what we do. We plant seeds, water seeds, expecting God to do the growth, establishing a ground for which people to walk on, and then exhorting them to walk in the gospel of Christ, or in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And this is why he's doing that no one be moved by these afflictions, that no one be unsettled, that no one be tempted away or fawned on and pulled away. No one would be moved by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we're destined for this. When we were with you, we kept telling you beforehand that we were to suffer affliction, just as it has come to pass, and just as you know. The devil tempts really in two ways. He entices the flesh and pleasures, and he entices you to leave off the gospel because it doesn't allow you to have your pleasures, or he tempts you by the affliction that comes by proclaiming the gospel. There's really the two tactics. And Jesus talks about them in the parable of the sower, that affliction and the desires of the flesh are what the devil uses to lure away. But here in Thessalonica, he's coming after them with affliction. And Paul wants to make sure that they're established and that they understand, we told you this is what was going to happen. We expected to be afflicted, and we expected the church to be afflicted. So don't be surprised. For this reason, for the reason of establishing your faith and securing you against the allure of the devil, when we could do it no longer, we sent to learn about your faith. We just needed to hear if you're still walking in the faith. For fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and our labor would be in vain. Paul's concern for the people in the church was that the devil wouldn't ruin the faith that they had. Church, don't let the devil ruin your faith. He's going to come after you through afflictions for Christ, and he's going to come after you through desires of the world that lead you away from Christ. Plant seeds. Get around people that will plant the seeds of the gospel, that will water the seeds of the gospel, that will help you in maintaining the foundation of the gospel and exhort you to live in a manner worthy of the gospel. These are people who are co-workers with God. And when they're co-workers with God in doing this work, God causes growth. So become one who does that in the lives of others, and get around those who does that in your own life, for fear that the devil would tempt you away, but that you might establish your faith. Do these things, church. Help one another. Love one another. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.